Hey guys, Eric Sacchetti here, and welcome to the Live the Movie Team weekly Google Hangout team meeting. Excuse me for it is April the 17th, Patriots Day here in New England, a special day with the Boston Marathon and the Red Sox playing at 11 o'clock. Not sure where you are, but welcome to the call. If you've never been on one of these calls before, we are the Live the Movie Team. We are a personal development group that has come together to really focus on helping each of us achieve our goals in our lives through using the metaphor of living the movie, seeing your life as a movie where you're that protagonist, you're that main character. You have those goals that you want to achieve in your life. And initially you think by going after those goals and achieving those goals, you'll get something. You'll be recognized. You'll think that you're significant. You'll then feel that you're important. You'll then feel like you're worthy of love. But what we actually do is in this process, we actually teach people that you need to become that person now so that you can have the best chance of achieving your goal, but become the person that can make a real difference. So that's what our group does, and that's why we have that metaphor, because a lot of times you hear about, look at challenges, opportunities, and things like that, and that's great, but at the same time, it's like, I wish I didn't have challenges, but when you start to see, no problem, Josh. No, so when you start to see that, it's all part of a story, it's all part of a movie, and the way you live inspires other people by your actions and, potentially your results too, but because of your actions, you're able to achieve the results that you want. That's how you can make a real difference. So what we actually do is our group, every 3 or 4 months, we get together. The last time it was at Mallory's house in Rhode Island. Before that, it was at our place in Rockport, which is just north of Boston, Massachusetts. We've done one in Greenville, South Carolina, so we get around, which is pretty cool. And basically what we do is for a 2 to 3 day period, we get together and we really focus on learning some personal development principles. We hone in on things that we've already learn them at a deeper level, but also that human connection of just actually being together and having fun and sharing laughs and feeling the emotion of other people around you, and then actually having some real fun. Last time we went to Dave and Buster's, which was actually a lot of fun. We've done things like, we've gone out to dinner and walked around the shops and stuff in Rockport. We got caught in a thunderstorm, so that was kind of interesting. In Greenville, we were supposed to go to a hockey game, but Mallory got sick. But we did go out to a bar and have some food and hang out. There was all kinds of people there that had just, I think, gone to a Clemson basketball game, which was at the same arena we were going to go watch a hockey game. But it was just cool to be in that atmosphere. That night, there was also the Republican presidential debate, so we got to walk right by all the people standing outside and all the people, picking their person and all that stuff. So it was cool to just be in the middle of the action. So that's kind of the stuff we do. And then on a regular basis, how we hold each other accountable is we each have a goal that we're really focused on for the year. And then to focus on how we really hold ourselves accountable day to day, week to week, is we have these calls. And what we do is each month we pick a book, and the book we're reading this month is called The Mastery of Self by Don Miguel Ruiz Jr., who actually, his most famous book is The 4 Agreements, which is actually Tom Brady's favorite book. And the subtitle is It's a Toltec Guide to Personal Freedom, and we started talking about it last week, and we'll have a short discussion this evening between me and Josh, and I'm not sure if Mallory's going to join us, but we'll have a short discussion about it tonight, and then we'll wrap up and enjoy this nice evening here. So, and what it does, the reason we read a book each month is because the principles that it takes to be successful, to develop yourself and the person to succeed, are all very similar. But one of the characteristics or one of the traits or one of the needs that one of my mentors, Tony Robbins, talks about is the need for variety, right? If you knew exactly what was going to happen every minute of every day, eventually you would get bored. Now, having certainty or knowing exactly what's going to happen or doing the same thing over and over, that creates that pattern of getting things into your subconscious mind so you get stuff done. But if that's all there is, then you'll get bored. So that's why we actually read a different book each month, because it's similar principles, but coming from a different perspective. It creates a different discussion. We try to focus on the main topics from the book, but we end up going off in little tangents because it's all about those same principles. So that's a little intro from me here. And we actually have Josh and Mallory on here. How are you guys doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing well.
Yeah, I'm doing good too.
All right.
You sound like you're still sick.
Who,
Yep.
me?
Little
No,
stuffy.
Oh,
Me
Eric.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a little bit. Yeah.
Little stuffy nose. Yep.
I hope you guys feel better.
Yeah, working on it. I feel like sleep is required to improve, and
That's true.
So for this month, actually, we picked it together as a group, but I was the one who came up with a couple of choices. So this book, Mastery of Self by Don Miguel Ruiz Jr., like I said, and it's actually some pretty deep stuff if you actually, everybody's got the book there, if you actually think about what he's saying. And the main thing is that I'm not going to get too far into the book. I've read pretty far, but I'll try to stick to the first 3 or 4 chapters because I don't know how far everybody's gotten. But, last time we talked about that whole concept. We kind of left off with the whole concept in the introduction or first chapter maybe. That whole concept of to be in control, you actually have to let go of trying to control everything. It sounds like counterintuitive, but that's actually how it is because you can't really control anything other than your own thoughts and your own actions. You can't control other people. You can't control the weather. Yet we try to control everything, and that makes us out of control. So that was the first principle that we really touched on. And the main things that I've read in the next couple of chapters was the whole concept of domestication and attachments, which I thought was very interesting. And it's kind of interesting the fact that the author talks about how a lot of times we have very good intentions with our actions and what we try to do, but the outcome doesn't end up being positive in the long run. And the author actually talks about an example of a parent who has a kid at the dinner table, and the kid a lot of times eats half of what's on his plate. And the parent uses guilt to get them to finish their meal. They say something like, if you don't finish your meal, you don't get dessert. If you don't, there's people starving in India or starving in China. My grandfather used to say that one. And it seems like a harmless thing to say. It's like, well, yeah, you want them to keep eating and keep eating. The problem is that what he talks about is that, let's say that person grows up, right? And they love eating. And now they're maybe when they were little, their partial portion really wasn't that much, and maybe they should eat the full plate. But when they're forced to do it, and they're forced to do it based on negative consequences, now all of a sudden they become older, and the small plate becomes a big plate, and now they eat half a plate, and they literally can't get up without eating their whole plate, and there's no one there telling them they have to finish their plate, but they always finish their plate, even if it's a huge serving that's way more food than they need. And it's because subconsciously their nervous system is connected that something bad will happen immediately if I don't finish my plate of food. So it's just interesting that that parent, there was probably not a negative intention, but a lot of times this has to do with the whole concept of domestication, which is basically that you create, kind of like Tony talks about, pain and pleasure. You create that whole concept based on negative consequences, and that a lot of times it really has to do with your intention. Let's see. So I highlighted this to try to point out. So this is an example of domestication action. No one doubts that the grandmother has the best intentions. She loves her grandson and wants him to eat his lunch, but the method she's using to achieve that goal has negative unintended consequences. Anytime guilt and shame are deployed as tools to provoke action, this counters any good that has been achieved. Eventually, these negative elements will resurface in one way or another. Now, the interesting thing is you say, well, Eric, I don't know about that, because I know people that had parents that had negative motivated people by saying this would happen if you don't do this or whatever. But the problem is that if you get in a situation where if you're always in that way, I mean, you always have to do, it's like I'm picturing someone who's saying like, I always have to work, and my parents, push me to always do my work, which is a good thing. But then when you become really successful, you can't stop working because that's the only thing you know, and you feel guilty if you stop working, or it's just an example. So so basically we're all screwed. That's what I'm trying to get at. No, I'm just kidding. But it is interesting, just anything that he says on the next page after that, he goes, we're the only creatures on the planet that self-domesticate, right? So those of you that have pets, like you domesticate your dog, you teach them, they get a reward if they go to the bathroom outside, and they get a treat if they do this or whatever. But they don't self-domesticate themselves. Like if you remove yourself from the situation, they don't go outside, go to the bathroom, come back in and take a cookie for themselves. Obviously they can't physically do that because they don't have hands, but they wouldn't do it anyway because they don't create that pattern within themselves. So his point is that we're the only creatures that actually take feedback from our environment and then bring it onto ourselves, even though there's the whatever was driving the consequence isn't even there anymore. So in that example with the food, the mother or the grandmother isn't telling you have to eat the whole plate of food, yet you still do the action. It's like the Pavlov's dog thing, except for the fact that you don't even need the bell anymore. You just start doing the action, and in yourself you say, oh, for some reason I feel really guilty if I don't finish this plate. So that's kind of what domestication is creating an environment where there's negative consequences towards relate to your action instead of positive consequences, or some sort of pleasure related to actions. And the interesting thing is, I'll let you guys share if you have any comments about this concept, but actually domestication is one of the reasons why a lot of people become successful and not fulfilled, is that they find an outlet away from their challenges. So maybe they came up in a rough environment, bad part in the neighborhood, so they played basketball. Basketball was their outlet, or they were an actor. When they were on that basketball court, when they were acting, they were a different person. But then their ego gets attached to that thing, which makes sense because that's the one thing that gives them pleasure. But the problem is, once they go on and they become successful, now it's only about basketball. Now it's only about acting. And they could still, that doesn't mean they can never be happy with basketball or happy with acting. It's that it's something outside of themselves that's giving them the happiness instead of focusing on themselves and who they become and whatever. So that has to do with domestication as well. So do you guys have any any comments or anything on that concept of domestication and the author's kind of thoughts about it?
Yeah, I agree that the author's concepts are really deep, and I think it's so fascinating that a lot of the stuff that he talks about is I can totally relate to, like that story of the child eating all of their food on their plate. I feel like that's what I was taught to do when I was young, because I always feel this, I don't know if it's guilt or just this anxiety associated with still food on my plate. So like having leftovers, and I was like, what? It's like a subconscious thing, I guess, that, I was trained as a kid. Like, we grew up, we weren't the wealthiest family growing up, and we always had food, of course, and we were always taken care of in that regard. But we had never had leftovers because we always finished our meal. Like we always ate all the food, and we couldn't get seconds if we had food on our plate still. So, and we always all wanted seconds, of course. There were 4 of us kids. And it's just funny to think back about, how we associate ourself with something that's outside of ourself. Like when the author talks about, attachments and domestications, it's just so fascinating to me. And it makes sense how sometimes we can't find the happiness that we're desiring because we associate it so closely to something that's outside of ourselves. Instead of finding the peace within, just of, being present in the moment. I think one of my favorite quotes so far in the book is from the first chapter I highlighted. Let me just find it. Oh, this living with a quiet mind creates a state of pure bliss that comes from being entirely in the moment. Nothing matters but the present. It is the only place where life can express itself. I thought that was really cool because it's so true. Like the only time we can ever feel anything or see anything or, do anything physically is now, like in the present moment. That's the only time that we're able to experience emotions and all that. So I think it's so cool that I feel like he's just going to keep taking it to the next level as I continue reading the book. But it's so fascinating how just his mind works. I think it blows my mind. It makes me think a lot deeper into the things that, we all kind of take advantage of, like associating our happiness with physical things, or they might not even be physical. They might be, psychological, that, we can overcome anything based on, how well we know ourselves and being present in the moment. And we always talk about on these calls, be present in the moment, focus. And it's, again, seeing it from a different perspective, it just opens up a whole new door of growth that's available for us. So I'm liking this book so far.
Cool. It's we're talking a lot about, negative consequences, but not all, that doesn't mean that if your parents did that, or if my parents did that, or someone's parents did that they're a bad person or they did something wrong, whatever. It's very interesting. And, we talk about different books and we hear the same concepts, like The Power of Now was a book that we actually read. And, we talk about being present. So the same principles come up. And as many of you watching, and also Josh and Mallory know, the number one person that I follow is Tony Robbins. And one of the things he talks about is that you're actually the way you are. There's, people try to overcomplicate things and then try to simplify things. But you are the way you are for this reason. The parent, or let's say if you were adopted or whatever, the parent or guardian in your life whose love you value most growing up drives who you became as you were growing up. So an example would be that if you were daddy's little princess and you didn't have to do anything to gain his love, well, that's why someone might be motivated, but only to a point, because they know regardless of what they do, daddy's still going to love them. So it's like, I don't understand why, I work hard. Why doesn't my princess work hard? Logan just took a spill. On the flip side of that, you also could say a parent that, the child looks up to a parent. Maybe it's a girl with their mom or a boy with their dad or vice versa or whatever, but they're perfect. But that to be perfect, they have to get straight A's and they have to be at the top of their class and they have to do all this stuff and they have to, so they actually only get love from their parents if they get the perfect result, which is literally impossible. So now you have an achiever who literally can't be fulfilled because it's impossible to be perfect. The first example, you have someone who is probably a loving, caring person, but isn't necessarily motivated because they know no matter what they do, they're not going to lose love from the source that they value most. Now, what's the good thing about those two examples? Well, that person, the first person, probably feels a lot of love. They're probably care deeply about their parents. They're probably not intentionally like a negative person. The person who's the perfectionist, they're an achiever. They make a difference. They do other things, but it's probably difficult for them to feel that they're a worthy person or they're successful. So there's both positive and negative consequences. So as you think about, I became a parent 11 months ago. Mallory's going to become a parent in the next month or so. Say, well, what's the right answer? Well, there is no right answer, because no matter what approach you take to your kids, there's both positive and negative aspects that come from it. Tony Robbins talks about, he goes, my mom was abusive. I had 4 fathers, and I'm actually the person I am today, both in the positive and the negative, because of her. The experiences I went through, those weren't good, but it also gave me the drive to not want to have people ever experience that again. And because of that, I have a capacity to feel like nobody else. So although I blame her for the bad things she did, I also blame her for the fact that those bad things brought out good things in me. So I just brought that up because if you go through the book, you talk a lot about negative beliefs and attachments and domestication and stuff. You don't want to get lost in the fact that it seems like, you know, you're talking about, oh, doing this wrong, I did this wrong, I think this wrong, I did that wrong. That's not really the point. It's more of just noticing what's the good aspects of something, and then what could be improved, or how could you kind of change your focus and your actions based on that. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Anyone have any comments real quick on what I just said based on that? And then I have one or two more things I got to in the book, and then something else I thought I'd share too.
Yeah, I mean, I think, talking about being parents, I mean, there's, so often you hear people who are about to become parents say, oh, I'm going to do that way differently. I'm never going to do that to my kids or whatever. But then personally, when I think about like who I am today, the positive and negative things that are, part of me and who I am, I'm like, I turned out pretty well considering, how my parents raised me. So they must have done something right. Like they have 4 pretty great kids who, I'm married, have a kid on the way, own a house, have a drive for success, motivated most of the time. And my sister's the same way, and my brothers are doing great too. So it's like, okay, so yeah, I didn't like some of the things my parents did when I was growing up as far as discipline or, curfews and stuff like that. But I got to give them credit. They did something right. So, but it's interesting because a lot of times, the drive to be different than your parents or a different parent than who your parents were can be a good thing for some. Like in Tony Robbins' case, of course, he wanted to be a different parent than his mom was to him, which ended up working out great for him because he's got this extreme motivation to help people and this big drive that, makes him who he is. And in that case, he wouldn't want to do everything that his mom did because it would just be devastating for his own children. And like a lot of things that I'll do my own way because, I don't remember what my mom did when I was, 2 years old and she had another baby in the house. But I think we learn as we go, and, life ends up working out the way it's supposed to either way. It just, we can't control everything. And that's the beauty of this book is we really can't control everything. And the power of, the way to be in control is of your own self and your own life is to just let go of those things that you can't control. It's just a fascinating concept. And I'm excited to read this book while I'm about to be a parent because it's got a lot of stories of, can relate, directly to what I'm about to experience in being a parent. So it's cool.
Cool. And I was going to jump in with something real quick, just based on what you were saying, and then Josh can share, is the way to be a perfect parent is just to do the best that you can with the information that you have. Because if you think about it, your parents probably did the best that they could with the information they had at the time, and you turned out well. So that if you want to be perfect, that's how to be perfect, is do your best with the information you have. And I'm sure you'll find out later on that you screwed everything up when your kids have kids, and that's okay too.
All right. Yeah. So I was just thinking about this a little bit. Just the fact that the whole story about the grandmother with the child and stuff like that, and I think sometimes too it when somebody tries to show you why, like tell you to do something as a child, sometimes it's helpful, and children don't always see this, so it's hard, quite at the stage of development where they can understand certain things. I think if you can look back on some of even the ones that were, and just try to see the concept that the person was trying to impart to you, and the reason why they wanted you to do what they asked you to do, that would give you a better sense of how to say, trying to say to yourself, okay, well, my plate is gone. Just don't do that. But I know that if I don't do that, then I'm gonna have that voice in my head and all that sort of stuff. So if you can
Yeah.
kind of figure out that she wants you to be courteous, and the idea is that you can just be, if you can just be courteous to everybody that you encounter, that's the goal that you're trying to achieve there. So
Right, exactly. See, here's the main problem, though. The main problem is that the subconscious mind takes everything literally. So I'll give you the best example I can think of. So when I was in the end of middle school, high school, the beginning of college, kind of like you guys have read my book, Mallory helped me write it, kind of before I had that like magical moment or whatever, right? Where I kind of went outside my comfort zone and I met new friends and did all that stuff, right? So one of the reasons that I was the way I was is, and again, I'm not trying to blame anyone, but I would think in self-observation that the person whose love I valued most is my dad's. Not that I love him more than my mom. It's more about whose you value, not who do you love. It's two different things. And both my parents actually told me, um, just don't get in trouble. That was one thing. It was just don't get in trouble and you'll be able to do whatever you want. Just don't get in trouble. The second thing is, whenever I left to go somewhere, and in my entire life, my dad would always say, be careful. Now, that's not what he meant. What he actually meant is, I love you, but he always said, be careful. But then think about my behavior, what I was talking about. I was always afraid to take a risk. I was worried about what people think about. What was I doing? I was being careful. So what Josh is getting at, it's totally right. But the problem is, like we said, like that example, the grandmother, what is her intent? Her intent is you to eat so you're nourished so that, you're not wasting food. Like the intent is totally there. The problem is that the literal interpretation is, the subconscious mind is very literal. So it's finish meal, no guilt. Don't finish meal, guilt. The end of story. So that's how the subconscious mind works. And again, it's oversimplification. You could have a discussion with your grandmother and explain it to the kid. It's a flawed example because it's so simplified, but that's really what happens. Those are where the unintended consequences of the people who taught us are. Like my dad had great intentions, but it came through as literal, be careful. So I would never take a risk. I would never want to ruffle any feathers. I'd never give my opinion. I'd never do any of those things. And that was part of it. Now, again, that's why we have this group, right? You say, well, you're screwed up because of your parents. No, you have to take responsibility and say, I've learned stuff, so I'm going to focus on myself and be able to teach that to other people and teach it to my kids. So that's what our group's all about. And most people never get that awareness. Like they never even think about that. And most people's lives are held back, believe it or not, by one belief or one phrase or one whatever, and they don't even know it, and they'll never face it, and they'll never think intuitively about it, which is kind of both scary and exciting. That if someone were to join a group like this or go see Tony Robbins or learn from Dr. Dyer or join a church group or do something that creates some sort of introspection, that you could actually turn it around. So I totally agree with you, Josh. It's just that it's that's what ends up happening. Our subconscious mind that gets attached to these things. So so one of the things that is talked about is like the identifying your attachments, and there's a sort of an exercise talking about, think of something that's in your life that you feel that you can't be without. That's either a gadget, a piece of jewelry, your house, a car, electronic gadget, a special memento, even a religious or sacred object, something like that. And it talks about asking yourself some of these questions, and I'll run through them quick, and you guys could potentially do the exercise at another time, or maybe you already did it. But it says, why do you feel so strongly about this item? So you think about that. What sense of security does the item give you? How is this item tied to your identity or sense of self? How does the item boost your ego? Are you pleased to show this item to others? Or is it an item that you show to no one and secretly feel special for just having it? the interesting thing about these questions is they're all pointing out about things outside of yourself, because it's like, I feel so strongly about this item, it gives me a sense of security, meaning if you don't have it, then you don't feel secure, meaning your security is attached to something that's outside of yourself. Does owning it make you feel more attractive than others, wealthier, more secure, more intelligent, more spiritual? So it's trying to get at, what's the feeling that you get that this object is giving you, and how can you transfer to have that feeling all the time? And then you can still have the object, it still can remind you of stuff, but not have your ego actually attached to it. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And then it goes on to ask some more questions about exploring losing this item, and asking yourself, is this attachment affecting your relationships with people in your life? Is your attachment causing you to play it safe and not pursue other things you really want? Can you think of any time in your life where you alter your action because of this item? How does this attachment affect your personal freedom? And finally, do you want to keep this level of attachment, or do you want to decrease it and let it go? The choice is always yours. So I was actually going to kind of walk through those questions and think and show you guys a specific example that actually has to do with a person. Let me see. Fear of loss. Let me see. So let's see. Have you guys seen the Star Wars movies?
Yes.
Have you guys seen all of them, like the original ones that were called 4, 5, and 6 in the 80s, and then 1, 2, and 3, which was a few years back, and now they're like doing odd ones that are like in between and all that stuff. Yeah. So anyway, just to share, even if you guys haven't, 4, 5, and 6, which were made in the 80s, were the movies with Darth Vader, Princess Leia, Luke Skywalker. And in those movies, you find out that at the end of the third movie, you find out that Darth Vader is actually Luke Skywalker's father, and also Princess Leia's father, and they are brother and sister. So how this actually relates to what we're talking about, I just want to give a slight background, and then it specifically goes to what we're talking about here, and actually might blow your mind when we throw this example through these questions. So one of the things by watching what's called 4, 5, and 6, so they were made in the 80s, but they were considered episode 4, 5, and 6, and then afterwards they made 1, 2, and 3, which was the prequel to what happened in those main movies. And one of the questions you have is, how did Darth Vader become this evil guy? How is he in charge of the evil empire when his son and daughter are, part of the Jedi, and they're the more positive, the fighting for good. And the entire movie series, as of course you guys all know, is a metaphor of basically yourself and everything we're learning. But anyway, in the third movie, so basically in the first movie, number 1, Darth Vader, who is Anakin Skywalker, so Luke and Leia's father. But they show him as a kid. He's a really nice kid, and he's got these skills, and he learns about what it means to be a Jedi. And in the second one, he gets a mentor that teaches him about the Jedi. But in the third movie, he falls in love with this woman who's I forget if she's not the queen. She's somehow related to the royalty of the planet that she's on, but she's not actually the queen, I don't think. But anyway, so he's a Jedi now, Anakin Skywalker, who becomes Darth Vader. But he has this fear inside of him. And as the movie goes along, he actually gets these visions that his wife is pregnant, which it actually turns out to be true, but that he loses her, that she dies, and he's afraid of this. So he actually confides in a guy who actually turns out to be the leader of the evil empire, but no one knows it, confides in him, and he says, if you stick with me, then I will make sure your wife doesn't die. But then when he goes back to the Jedi, they call it the Jedi Council, there's a character called Yoda. You guys probably remember Yoda. He's like this green little guy, and he's kind of like a monk, right? He's like the guy with all the wisdom. And what he actually says to Anakin Skywalker is actually probably the most profound thing that you could probably learn in your entire life. Tony talks about it. Will Smith talks about it in that video that we used to show at conferences sometimes. And this is what Yoda says. This is what he said to Anakin Skywalker, who became Darth Vader. So he says, "It's a shadow of greed, the root of those feelings of attachment and jealousy. The fear of loss is the path to the dark side," referring to being afraid of losing something dear, which could possibly lead you to the extreme lengths to retain it. So how he ends up on the dark side is because he wants to do whatever it takes to make sure that his wife doesn't die. And what he does is he confines in the dark side. But as he does that, the Jedi Council realizes that he's gone over to the dark side, so they go and try to protect his pregnant wife. And as he joins the dark side, he finds out that his wife has confided with the Jedi and actually turns on her and tries to kill her. So the very person that he's doing all of the actions in his life to try to protect, he joined the evil empire to try to protect her, but because he did it and focused on that, he feels that she betrayed her, and in the end of that movie, tries to kill her. Of course, Obi-Wan Kenobi ends up almost killing Anakin Skywalker. I forget his name, but the evil lord there ends up saving him and turning him into Darth Vader. That's how the movie ends. So how does that relate? You think about those questions. So does that say, like, so I'm really not supposed to be attached to my parent or my kid or my wife or whatever? Well, actually, Tony talks about this, Will Smith talks about it, and Don talks about in this book. If you want to truly be happy and you want to make sure that no matter what, you live a life of happiness, you actually have to be attached to nothing, meaning no one, not even yourself, which sounds kind of crazy. But if you think about the people that made the most, that we actually have holidays for, Martin Luther King, what did he do? He set himself aside. One of his quotes that's not necessarily that famous, but he goes, "Most people sit in fear and they don't take any action or believe in anything because they don't want to die." He goes, "Well, you're going to be dead forever. So whether you die tomorrow or you die 100 years from now, you're going to be dead for the same amount of time. Why not stand for something, free yourself, and go after something that you believe in?" That was his quote. Will Smith says the same thing. You guys might remember this from his video that we used to show at the conferences. He goes, "Life's very simple. This is what I believe in, and I'm willing to die for it. Now you do what you got to do." That's it. That's his thing. And he talks about the book The Alchemist as one of the books that inspires him. So back to, this will be the last thing I'll share tonight, but back to the identifying your attachments. Luke Skywalker is extremely attached to his wife, which is obviously makes sense, but he believes without her he'd be nothing. His ego is attached to obviously making sure that she's secure. And what would losing her mean? Losing her would mean that he would lose love for himself, and then says, "Can you think of any time that your actions were altered because of this item or person or whatever?" He joined the dark side to try to save her. And it says, what does this attachment affect your personal freedom? He actually gave up his own personal freedom to try to save her, but actually by joining the dark side. And obviously he joined the dark side. And at the end of the 6th movie, he actually ends up becoming good again before he dies by killing the evil emperor guy and telling Luke that you can change back from being bad to good. And again, like I said, the whole series is a giant metaphor. But and I know this is extremely deep stuff, and I know I have a ego attached to myself and other people and all that stuff. So it's not necessarily about doing everything right or being perfect or whatever. But that's just a perfect example. I had watched a lot of the movies recently, and I could just see that playing out. You know how it's interesting, like in your own life, or if you're just talking about something, it's tough to see something. It's tough to like notice a principle in action. But then when you see it play out, like in a movie, that's why we have the theme "Live the Movie." I watched those movies recently, and I could see the whole thing playing out. And I could see how even the happiest and most excited of people that Anakin Skywalker was in the first movie and a half, how you could switch and actually join the dark side. And it doesn't necessarily mean you're an evil person deep down, but because he got domesticated and he was attached to things and he let his ego take over, he failed to realize that his actions had actually departed from the goal that he actually intended to have, which was protect his wife, which everyone intends to do. But he focused on that so much that he gave up everything else in his life and actually lost his wife before he even he lost his wife. He tried to kill her because she was going to leave him, and that's where the battle at the end of the third movie came from, is because his ego was attached to it. So I know that's a movie, and our group's about Live the Movie. I know it's a deep concept, but I don't know if you guys have any comments about kind of the exercise with the questions and also the example that I talked about related to that movie series.
Well, I think the example that you gave with the movie series is perfect, because I was, as you were going through that and I was reading through, because I haven't got this far in the book yet, I was like, what would I don't know what I would choose as my something that I identify with, because I think I was overthinking the questions. Like I was thinking too much about, okay, well, how would I answer this question for this item, or how would I answer this for this person, and how would I but it's not, I just have to simplify it. And that movie example is perfect, because it literally, that was the thing that brought him to his death, was
Exactly.
into the dark side, was his identifying with that one thing.
Right. And then, but the flip side of it, especially if someone's watching and hasn't learned some of these concepts, like, so what does that mean? Like, what's the antidote to that? The antidote to that is gratitude, which is to say, every day I'm with my wife or husband is a gift. Every day that this baby that I have is with me is a gift, because you can't be afraid of losing them and be so grateful that you have them in the same second. You can switch, but you can't in the same second be so grateful they're there and afraid of losing them, because you can't have two thoughts held in your mind at the same time. So, and because you do that, you see every moment with that person or with that object or with whatever as a positive. Is something that you get to do, something that you get to enjoy, rather than something that you're afraid of losing. So that's kind of the antidote to fear that you're talking about, is gratitude and realizing that. Sometimes you can use it both ways. Like some people do like a fear gratitude thing, which is like they really focus and say, oh my God, everyone I care about just, died. How do I feel? Well, nothing else matters. And then they flip and say, well, those people are still here. How do I feel? Oh, I feel grateful. I should focus on that. So some people do those kind of contrast exercises, but the contrast, the way to overcome fear is to be grateful and to see everything as a gift in every moment that you're with those people or that object or that item or the time you get to spend at that house you love or the car that you enjoy or the games that you get to go to. You see it all as a gift instead of just an expectation and being afraid that it's going to end at some point, which is not easy, by the way. I'm sure we all have fears of losing things and people and all that stuff, that's for sure. So it's not something I've mastered. It's an ongoing process, but we're trying to learn the principles and try to implement them as best we can.
Yeah, that's so good. It's funny that you're talking about gratitude too. Real quick before we wrap up, I read a daily devotional. It's just like it's a really tiny book that has just 1 page per day that I read. And the last couple of days have been about gratitude and about how, if you pray or meditate or whatever the case is, this book is about prayer. But when you pray, instead of asking for things to be fixed and like complaining about the problems that you have and saying, why can't this be fixed? Please help me fix this. Instead saying, thank you for this part of my life, because I know that I'm getting healthier by the day, instead of being like, why am I so sick? Focusing on the negative side of it, focusing on the positive, even though you may still be sick that current day. But by focusing on, I'm thankful that I'm getting better every single day. That can, help improve your mood in that moment, even though you do still feel like crap, That's just an example I thought of.
Absolutely. Anything left, Josh? Anything else to share?
I think my mind is empty at the moment, so.
All right. So I'll end with a quote from Tony Robbins, which relates to what we were just talking about. So what his quote is, "What's wrong is always available, and so is what's right," which means that depending on what you choose to focus on is going to determine what you feel, is going to determine, you know, the actions you take and the meaning that you take from you know, what's going on in your life. So I'm excited to continue this book. I hope some of the ideas we talked about tonight excited you guys, and like we always talk about, you know, it's not about mastering something this day, it's about a continual process, and some of the ideas we teach are deep and ongoing. So yeah, we used a movie example to try to, you know, illustrate a point, which I thought was cool. So unless you guys got anything else, that's what I got for tonight. I'll probably be looking to try to finish this book this week. Had a little bit of a tough week. We had some colds and stuff, but probably have more time this week to really dive into this and look into it. And I really like books where that really the main topic is focusing on mastering yourself, because like we said, the only thing you can control is your own thoughts and your own actions. So it's best to work on that first, and then go attack the world with being a center, having a center inside yourself, so that, you know, if there is chaos and things around you, you still know who you are and what you're about. So I think that's important. So unless you guys got anything else, live the movie. We'll see you guys next week, and I'll talk to you real soon.
Bye, guys.
See ya.